Is heart disease hereditary? First of all, when we're talking about heart disease, we have to actually define what we mean by heart disease. When I talk about heart disease, what I'm talking about specifically is plaquing of the artery, hardening of the arteries, and stroke. Basically, restriction of blood flow to the heart and the brain. There's other conditions that affect the heart, such as heart failure, and also cardiac arrhythmias. The thing about cardiac arrhythmias is there's many things that can influence this. It's usually electrolyte imbalances, caffeine and drugs, things like that. Now, plaquing of the artery, if you think that plaquing of the arteries is hereditary, that's just silly. Your arteries don't just develop plaque because of your genetics. Plaque is built up first by inflammation, well, actually, first by damage, and then by inflammation to heal that damage, and it sends cholesterol to the damaged part of the artery to help heal it up. And what happens is, well, for one, if anybody knows anything about inflammation, inflammation is swelling. Okay, and the swelling promotes blood flow and circulation to the area to heal the wound. And cholesterol is a sterol that is used by the body to help protect the inner tissues, well, to protect the tissues in general, all the tissues of the body, from inflammation and oxidative stress. Essentially, cholesterol serves many functions, but one function is as an antioxidant. Also, LDL and HDL are lipoproteins that carry lipids throughout the body and other things as well. When you say heart disease is hereditary, that sounds like you're just making a massive assumption based on the status quo and things you've heard all your life. Just because you were told that God exists does not mean that God actually exists. Just because you were told that heart disease is genetic does not mean that heart disease is genetic. Please try to find me somebody who has had a heart attack that cannot be explained by their nutrition and lifestyle. Now, if they have cardiac arrest due to arrhythmias, irregular heartbeat, that doesn't count. That's not heart disease. That's not plaquing. That is irregular heartbeat, which is usually caused by, like I said, drugs, electrolyte imbalance, and other things. This is not hereditary. So there's actually been experiments done with families. In fact, I saw one study done on a group of people from the Mediterranean. Actually, I have friends from the Mediterranean, from France, who ate their native diet, and they had very low rates of heart disease, their entire family. And then some of the family moved to America. And when they moved to America, over years and years and years, they developed all sorts of health problems. They got overweight. And I know some people, they're older though, much older, like in their 50s and 60s, who spent just 10 years here in America after moving from Italy. Or not Italy, France. And they developed heart disease. Of course, this is because they got caught up in the rat race of the 9-to-5 job. They didn't have enough time, or so they thought, to eat healthy. And so they're eating French fries, fried foods, candy and junk. Okay. Now, a lot of people aren't really aware of just how much junk they're eating. But anyway, so the family members that moved to America got sick and overweight. Most of them. Some of them were relatively unchanged. But the people that stayed in the Mediterranean were healthy, didn't develop disease, etc., etc. These diseases were not existent in this family before they moved to America. So their dietary patterns had changed drastically, and they developed disease as a result. This is a perfect example of the fact that nutrition matters much more than genetics. Now, here's the thing. So, like, let's say your grandpa had a heart attack, right? And your grandma had a heart attack, and your cousin Jemima or whatever had a heart attack, right? And then you had a heart attack, and now your doctor's telling you it runs in the family. Well, let me ask you something here, bucko. What did your family eat? Okay? Is it that this disease ran in your family? Or is it that these junk foods, fried foods, vegetable oils, lard, or whatever it is that you all eat, runs in the family? Usually, food is pretty similar. Your diet and nutrition is pretty similar, and lifestyle is pretty similar throughout the entire family, at least nutrition. You know, if your grandma ate margarine, your mom probably eats margarine. And if your mom eats margarine, you probably ate margarine for a long time, unless, of course, you educated yourself. And so you could easily draw a correlation between, oh, it's genetic, it runs in my family, and prevalence of a disease. But correlation does not equal causation. And just because your doctor says, oh, it's genetic, doesn't mean it's genetic. All he really knows about and cares about is diagnosing your illness with a blanket term like arteriosclerosis, etc. So he can prescribe you a drug, run some tests on you, do some surgery, and then send you back home as fast as he can so he can deal with the next patient. Okay, most doctors do not know what the fuck they're talking about when it comes to actually healing disease and hammering down the causation of a disease. Not to say that doctors are useless, but come on, anybody who understands medication and treatment versus actually healing a disease and addressing the root cause, you'll know that doctors say everything is genetic. Okay? Just because you have a certain set of genes does not mean that those genes will be turned on. Okay, genes respond to your environment. This is what epigenetics is. If you eat a certain food, you're much more likely to have heart disease in combination with bad genetics. If you have like a genetic tendency to have a certain disease or something, you can actually significantly eliminate your risk by changing your nutrition and lifestyle. Okay, so I have a lot more to say on this, but since I'm recording with my iPhone, I can only record 10 minutes at a time. But it's very easy to debunk this whole, oh, like heart disease and diabetes type 2 is genetic or hereditary. There's so many people who have reversed these diseases, and also usually they don't happen until later on in life anyway. Usually you can see a clear pattern that leads up to these diseases, and then you're trying to say, oh, it's just genetic. Yeah, sure, I ate a tub of lard yesterday, I eat ice cream every day, whatever. And also, it's not just processed foods, but there's other patterns that you can really look at that can cause heart disease or different diseases in general. So don't think like, oh, I don't eat much junk food, just a candy bar every day. Like, okay, but that's enough to cause issues, okay? So leave your questions and comments down below, and let me know what you think. I'd love to have a discussion about this.